So that's some.
By the way, did you see the CrowdStrike thing was caused by regex?
Mm-hmm. Regex should not be allowed in the kernel.
Well, I could be, I was only half paying attention. I think the problem was that there was a regex in the test suite. The number of arguments changed, but the regex passed because they weren't actually using, there was a disconnect in the thing that they were testing was on a mock object,
Yeah.
but what they had changed was the real object.
They also, I think they updated their testing suite at this, or their exact tests in their testing suite at the same time that they made the code change to a regex. So they didn't bother to check if it passed their previous tests, which would have caught it.
I'm not gonna lie. A lot of times, probably about 30% to 50% of the time, if a test passes, I update the test with the new value. Because most of the time that's what it is. You know, most of the time it's like, oh, actually we need to pad all these values with one more space on the left side. Or, you know, our coefficient, you know, the 3.972 is a better fit than 3.971. You know, that this cascading failure. So you go and you just say, oh, well, looks right. Anyway, we can get started, whatever. I thought that a few more people that had RSVP would show up, but maybe not, so.
They probably saw it was me speaking and decided not to come.
Nah, I just think there's just, they probably saw it was me hosting. But, anyway, do we want to get started?
Should we just go with the
There's
five of
one
us?
more in a second, so
What's that?
let's go one more in a second.
Oh, Niles is here. Okay. All right, we'll wait. We'll wait. Oh, I tried a drink that was mixed with both lemonade and Mountain Dew. That was surprisingly good.
I've had that before. That's good.
At Swig, the Dragon Summer or something.
Oh no, I've just mixed lemonade and Mountain Dew.
Oh wow, I didn't know something people did. I feel ashamed that I didn't know about that as a Mountain Dew fan.
I feel like one of the problems with Mountain Dew is it doesn't have any bitterness, even though it's a... I think it's improved by adding a little bit of lemon flavoring to it.
Compare Mountain Dew to Sprite.
Yeah, I don't like Sprite all that much either. Sprite is the worst of the lemon lime drinks. Starry is better.
7-Up is better.
Nay, Sierra Mist. Hello.
What's up?
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right, well, now that you're here, we'll go ahead. We were waiting for you. We gave up. I was like, well, I think he's not coming. And then right as we were doing that, then you show up. Okay, I've already got the stream rolling. Just a quick welcome. I'll go ahead and end the countdown my Bob there. All right. Welcome everybody to Utah Zig, where we get ziggy with it until we zag out. Yeah. Thanks again to Vivint for hosting us and providing us yummy pizza and endless fountain of soda. And to Jeff for getting everything organized for us. I'm your host, AJ O'Neill / CoolAJ86, but that's whatever tonight. The real, and then we got Andrew, we got AJ, we got Niles, we got Robert, we got Jeff, in case anybody didn't know anybody's names. So Andrew, I will just let you take it away, except wait, one thing. I found out, I got it. You were out of the room, but I got it. Druid Gossage.
Druid Gossage.
Druid Andrew Gossage.
Yes.
Druid Gossage. It's like Mad Libs, not Mad Libs. What's that game? Boulder Dash. I got it. So yeah, I know. I'm in the in crowd now. Anyway, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. So today we are going to be talking about Zig and Python interop. Probably just talking about calling Zig from Python. If we have some extra time and we want to talk about it the other way, I have a little bit that I can show on that.
Really?
But probably just going to focus on calling Zig from Python. What's really great is both Zig and Python are designed to be usable with the C ABI. As a result of that, they can talk to each other just fine. Zig is compatible with the Zig API with the C ABI if you choose. And it's opt-in, but it's really easy. And Python is essentially a C library. So going back and forth is really easy. But first, kind of to start us off, I think it's useful to maybe have a little bit of a discussion of why we might want to use a language like Zig and why we might want to use a language like Python. And that will help us understand why we would ever in a million years want to work between the two of them. So, does anybody program in Python at all? Let's start with that one. A little bit. So, why would you choose Python for a given task?
Mostly for writing something fast. A lot of data manipulation stuff, or I've got a bunch of stuff to do, and Python includes very few lines of code.
Very great example. Anyone else? It doesn't have to be Python. We can go with a similar language. Why you might choose JavaScript, why you might choose Ruby. One of those high-level, not type-safe languages.
Oh, so Go's out, huh? Go has interfaces, they're not type safe. Well, empty interfaces aren't type safe.
Could be if you
So-
wanted to use some tool or API in that ecosystem that wasn't in Zig yet.
That's true. Python specifically, has one of the best standard libraries and one of the best ecosystems there is of any language. The tools for that ecosystem, not so great, but the actual libraries available are fantastic. How about a language like Zig? Why would we want to use Zig? Or Rust or C, a low-level type-safe language, ignoring the fact that C isn't actually type-safe, it just pretends to be.
Yeah, I'd say that Go was far more type safe. Well,
So we can flex on others.
That's a good one.
That's C++. That's C++.
Yeah.
Or Haskell.
Yeah, that's
I legitimately saw an article this last week about a guy bragging about the fact that he managed to write a useful program in Haskell after learning it for 10 years.
nice. Wow. He picked it up pretty quick.
There was that one joke article, it's like the dozens of Haskell programmers have finally found the one industry professional who cares.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one too. That one's funny. So for me, one of the reasons I like Zig is because it's fast. I'm not huge on type safety, but it is an advantage a lot of the time. I'm not a die-hard type guy, but it is useful. You can optimize a lot more when you've got type safe things. You avoid a lot of errors. And another advantage of Zig is it's got a really good tool chain. You can cross-compile really easily. It's got a decent package manager, a really good build system, which is essentially just a subset of Zig, rather than having to learn something like CMake. Yeah, so those are some of the reasons you might choose Zig. Those are some reasons you might choose Python. Let me demonstrate something a little bit about
Getting fancy up in here.
why you might not want to use Python for a given task. Does anybody know what Ackerman's function is?
Yes, that one.
No, I don't know what that means.
So it's really hard to grasp what this is actually doing. It has to do with mathematical hyperoperations. That's not important
So it's
for
not
right
the
now.
Fibonacci sequence.
It's not the Fibonacci sequence. Ackerman's function was one of the first functions ever found that cannot be done without recursion. So you cannot do this with a loop. It has to be recursive.
I can't believe it. Sorry.
There's a whole bunch of mathematical proofs on it, but it hits a couple things that I want to demonstrate right now. One, its recursion grows exponentially. And two, its recursion grows exponentially. It requires it to call itself a bunch of times, and anytime Python has to do a bunch of things in a row, it slows down really badly. And anytime it has to recurse, it runs into problems. So let me show this. I'm going to call this function with the arguments 3 and 8. The thing with Ackerman's functions is as these arguments get higher, the time it takes to run and the amount of recursions grow exponentially. So if I run this, right, seemed to run relatively quickly, right, a total of 245 milliseconds. That's pretty fast. However, if you were to try to make a plot of Ackerman's functions with a bunch of different arguments, that time would build up. Also, I will demonstrate another problem with recursion in Python just by changing one argument from a 3 to a 9. Python has a max recursion depth
Yeah.
of 1,000 recursions. Your operating system also has a max recursion depth, but it's a lot higher.
Yeah, I think on Windows it's 1 megabyte of stack space you have to start with. And Linux, I think it's more. I think it's 8.
So I'm going to import the Zach function, which is an implementation of the Ackerman function in Zig that I wrote. And let's compare. So this, which took 263 milliseconds to run in Python, the equivalent function took 10.9 milliseconds. And now if I change that from an 8 to a 9, not only can it run, but it can run faster than the Python function can do the previous one by a lot. I have another demonstration to show another case where Python really struggles. Like I said, anytime it has to do a bunch of things in a row, you're going to get slowdown. That's not just recursion, it's also... Oh, where did that go? Oh no. We're going to do some live code fixing.
So are you staying entirely within like regular or standard Python?
I'm not using
Yeah, 'cause there's like
Cython or Jython or... And honestly, I would recommend that you don't either. A lot of those tools are not very well maintained, and a lot of them this is why you should never name things foo. Let's try that now. I had this working before. What line is that on? I'm really making a fool of myself here, guys. 283. Oh, I see what I did. It wasn't this one. Okay. This is also why you don't prepare a live demonstration.
You just don't prepare.
You just don't. I should have just talked instead of trying to be all fancy.
That feels like that error doesn't line up with the line.
No, it doesn't, does it?
Now,
Unbound.
please correct the assembly in that.
Yeah, compile it to assembly, I'll fix it for you.
Foo equals check squares.
Is it one of those things where it's like keeping the memory from like previous instructions you've ran? Like,
It could be. I can try restarting the kernel. I promise I'll get this fixed in just a second. If I don't,
Don't make promises about time that it takes to do stuff in code.
Yeah, that's for managers to do.
Or marketing.
Yeah, marketing.
Oh yeah, we'll have that for you next week. Just sign the contract now.
Wait, is it still called Vivid or is it now called Energy?
We still have a Vivint brand, parent company's Energy, but yeah. So Vivint is a reasonable.
So we think Vivint or we think Energy for being here?
Whatever makes you happy.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
We'll let the internets decide.
I guess, like it's mostly useful for hiring purposes, so maybe Vivint is more interesting in terms of people looking for jobs here, but I don't know.
part of the problem is this resolution that I have to use is so small. I promise this is really cool. Just hold on for a minute. Talk amongst yourselves.
I learned to do instruction today.
Really?
Yeah,
There's one more.
yeah, there's one more. I didn't even know about it.
I'm a little disappointed. I thought you were old and mature enough to not need instructions.
What was the instruction?
It was, it's an ADX 512 instruction where you can take a 64-byte vector and look up each byte
Okay.
into a 128-byte table at once.
Oh, it's an acceleration function specifically for AES? Okay.
Yep.
Well, the prime got something wrong about assembly in bitstream, so I think you need to comment.
Oh, yeah.
This might be a little hard to see because I didn't plan on it being this resolution. But this is a raycasting engine programmed in Python. Don't worry the fact that the walls are bent, that's because I intentionally didn't bother checking for depth of field, and you have to do that if you want to avoid that problem. But you can see this is a raycasting engine. Those rays on the left side are each checking for collision against the walls. And you can see running this in Python, we are getting anywhere from 8 to like 30 frames per second. And that's because the Python, the thing it is worst at is looping. However, if I press this button, the raycasting is now being processed by Zig.
Where's the decimal, that FPS number? Just kidding, that's
So I don't think you can get a decimal from raylib, which is what this is using. But yeah, we've gone a lot faster. We've gone from getting as low to 8 FPS to a low pushing 400.
Blazingly fast.
Blazingly fast.
I don't want to be that guy, but it's like 3 rectangles and a triangle. Shouldn't it be able to do a little faster?
It's probably only using the CPU, right?
It is only using the CPU.
Yeah.
It's entirely CPU bound.
We got CPUs faster than that.
It is a cheap laptop.
Oh, okay.
But no, Python is legitimately just slow. So the real benefit of Python is that you can develop things for it quickly. So for instance, if I was going to be doing a game jam and I had 8 hours to make a video game using Raylib, I would not want to do that in Zig. I would not want to do that in C++. I would not want to do that in Rust. Python would be a really good choice because it's really fault tolerant, it's memory safe, but certain things like that. When I pressed that button, the only thing I changed was the raycasting. It switched from processing it itself in Python to processing it in Zig.
Just calls a different function.
Just calls a different function, just calls the function from Zig. And that was able to make the game run several times faster. So again, Python, it's really fast to develop for. If you want to build something fast, it is the best choice. But if you want to build something that runs fast, it's not the best choice.
That'd be JavaScript. JavaScript. You wouldn't be able to tell with modern frameworks, but the language runs fast.
Not compared to Zig. Compared to Python, yes.
Okay, but why? I mean, the ergonomics of Zig are so good. Why would you not just want to go Zig all the way? It seems like it'd be faster to write in Zig because you've got the better tooling.
Because you don't have to worry about memory management, there's a lot less things you have to worry about because it's more... Zig is not nearly as fault tolerant as Python, which is partially intentional so that you have to manage errors so that it doesn't just keep going with odd effects. But that makes it really hard to iterate on. That makes it really hard to do a number of things. There's also the fact that just more people know Python or JavaScript than know Zig. Python is the #1 most popular language among new programmers. JavaScript is the second most popular. Zig is not on the chart.
Yeah.
But learning to write enough Zig to write that raycasting function, though, does not take long. Becoming an expert in Zig, writing a game engine in Zig, writing a server in Zig, that takes a lot of work. Writing just that one raycasting function is easily doable. So, those are my thoughts. Feel free to agree or disagree. We're going to talk, and I'm going to now show you guys how to write for Python, how to call Python functions, or Zig functions from Python, unless anybody has any questions first.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, so we're not going to mess with the build system today. I'm going to show you the command to compile something. First, it's just Zig. This exclamation mark is just to get something to run in the console when you're running from inside Jupyter. That's all that is. But you just build lib, make it dynamic. Released fast is my favorite optimization for this. Don't run things in debug. A lot of times they're not that much faster than if you had just run them in Python. And generally you're going to want to link the C library for a lot of stuff you would do with interfacing. Let me pull up my terminal.
What do you use libc for?
You're going to want to use the C allocator, and sometimes if you use the C allocator, it throws a fit. I don't know why, but it just wants it sometimes.
Why would we use the C allocator versus...
It is significantly more compatible with Python.
Oh, okay.
And you're not... It's also essentially static, right? If you create one instance of the C allocator and create another, they're going to work in combination with each other. I don't know whether or not that is true for all of them, but I do know even the Zig documentation says if you're writing a library for C to use the C allocator, which is essentially what we're doing. Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm down.
So we're going to go to Okay. Here's the Ackermann's function that we had earlier. And here's the minimum viable product for calling something from Zig, for writing a Zig C compatible function. It's just a regular Zig function with the word export in front of it instead of the word pub. And then all you got to do is in Python import C types, and then you use this function ctypes.dll and then give it the path to the library. And then what we're going to do right here, we're setting the return type, the resolution type. It cannot figure that out on its own, but we're just going to give it a type of ctypes.cfloat, and then we call it, and we get it.
That makes sense.
This is a little wrong, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that. Compared to the issue with the Raylib demo, not a big deal. Yeah, it's really just as simple as that for the most simple functions. You can also do arrays. So here we are, let me just make sure I have. So here I have a function where it takes a pointer to an array and it just sets all the values incrementally. So this is how you create a C array in Python. The Python code here is going to be a little bit uglier than the Zig code, going back to you asking why you would use Python and not just use Zig, so you can get this beautiful syntax here. And so we're going to go ahead and call that. And right, we initially set the values to, or sorry, this is where we're doing that, to 888. But now if we do, we're going to unpack the C array. Now we see that it got set. One of the things with using pointers as well, I don't have an example of this, but you cannot return error unions from Zig when you're using an export function. So if you're calling Zig from C, if you're calling it from JavaScript, if you're calling it from Python, error unions are just out the window. So
Did you get a compile error, or does it?
Compile error.
Okay.
So what a lot of people will do is they will have the return. So right, this function right here, say it returned an F32. It could also have an output parameter, is what it's called, where you give it a pointer to, say, an integer, and then after it runs the function, it'll check.
Get thee hence, Satan. Well, I mean, I guess you got to do what you got to do.
The alternative to that is you can use Zig structs from Python, more or less, and you can have a struct that contains a message of whether or not something errored. Or you can return null.
So, or you could do what Linux does, and you could return a 64-bit integer where like all the upper bits are set, but then like the lower 10 will tell you what kind of error it was. And
Yes, let's definitely do that.
I think what Windows does, and if it's an error, then it just returns 0, or sometimes it returns 1. Depending on what function it is, that's how you know it's an error.
I mean, that-
either that or the function actually returns that number.
That's what C does. C does not have errors, which is why you cannot return any kind of error from Zig if you're using the C ABI. C does not know what the concept of an error is, so that's why if you ever see a C program, it says return 0 at the end of the main function, because the operating system looks for the integer at the end of the main function, and if it's 0, it says the function ran properly.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to point out the excitement I have here that you're in a browser running Jupyter, opening tabs with a shell in it, and then running Vim in the shell. Like, on one hand, it feels convoluted. On the other hand, I can sort of see you've got this weird encapsulation for everything you're doing hiding in your Jupyter install. So it's kind of clever.
Thank you.
And I'm surprised it works, is the other thing. Like terminal emulators in a tab in a browser. Like, I'm very impressed.
Have you ever seen
Thank you.
the Windows XP in a browser where you can open up Internet Explorer?
Okay, I think I've seen that at some point.
It seems that Vercel has taken it over at the moment. So it looks like Vercel is now using it as an ad thing, but
This actually seems like it could be useful though, like, whereas I'm not sure the value one is, so.
I if you ever just need peace in your life, Windows XP was the most beautiful operating system that has ever existed on planet Earth. It was just calming.
That's an opinion.
No, not the pop-ups with you have a virus. Like the greens and the blues.
Everything else.
A clean install, disconnected from the network.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Service Pack 3, released in what, 2019? Service Pack 4.
So I just want to show how to make a struct that's compatible with C/Python/whatever you want to call it from. It's just more or less the same, except you add the word extern to it. Again, really easy. I do want to I did just put this debug thing right here just to show that you are allowed to put functions on these structs. You will not be able to call it from the other side.
Okay.
But if you call a function in Zig that accepts this as an argument, this will work. So you can call it in Zig. So
why would you not just always use structs for scenarios where you want to be able to return multiple values? Why would you ever choose to do an out parameter when you just have a struct?
it requires a little less setup. You can see here in Python there is like a peculiar way you have to set up structure compatibility. And you don't have to do that. It's not that bad. This is not the standard way to create a class. This whole fields thing, which has to inherit from ctypes.structure, it's not that bad, but it is a little setup. So,
But I mean, it's about the same as, I mean, if you were doing an out parameter, you have to do the same thing, right? Because you still have to, you will do just that. You have to say what C type is it and all that.
yeah,
Okay.
it's not that bad. One advantage to out parameters is a lot of people who work with C and C libraries expect it. That's the standard way to do it. So there is that. That doesn't mean you have to do it, especially not in your own stuff.
Oh, thanks.
The answer is, AJ, I don't know that there is a good reason.
I was just wondering. If there's, it's just C++ people got to flex.
Well, C++ has-
in a browser. He uses Neopim in a browser, so he's flexing hard today.
Yeah.
Does it run Lua
It does, yeah,
in Python or Zig?
in C. But
Isn't that JavaScript? It's a browser.
I'm showing the interop of many things. That's really what this talk is about.
All right, cool.
Yeah, just showing it works, right? You can get a struct from Zig, you can pass it to Zig, and right, it called that debug thing. The reason this is below is just because of how Jupyter formats its stuff. It should be between, but largely unimportant. And kind of the last thing I want to show is the strategy you want to use for allocation. It's the wrong tab. So it's more or less the same. Again, you are going to want to use the standard.heap.c allocator anytime you're using the C ABI, just because essentially nothing outside of Zig is going to work with any of the other allocators. But, right, if you want to create a new F32, you can just create it the same way that you normally would. and then you would free it more or less the way you normally would.
So it's just a pointer, right? Why would anything up above be concerned what allocator it has?
I think in the examples that I've prepared, they're really simple. And I think I also don't know.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you have to call in a zig to do alloc and free, you could use an alloc and free that's written in zig, right?
You could.
Oh, because it's passing the pointer back, so then it becomes the owner, so then it wants to free it. Is that what we're saying? Or it wants to allocate before it calls the
Well,
arguments?
in Python, you're doing manual memory management here. You're calling alloc, and then you're calling free. And so that would be the same either way, whether it's the C allocator or not, right?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm going to admit. I know the people who make Zig recommend anytime you're writing a library for C that you use the C allocator, but I don't know all the reasons for that.
You know what? For the C allocator, it only needs one pointer as input, right? Whereas a lot of Zig allocators will take slices
Oh, that's true.
because it's more efficient. You don't have to actually look up the length that is associated with the pointer, whereas the C allocator will do that under the hood. And so you can simply give a pointer and then it can get it back when you call free. So you would have to have, if you were to use a custom allocator that's written in Zig that works off slices, you probably need a separate hash map to look up what the associated length is with the pointer.
Another thing that might be the case, I'm not sure, is when you are debugging memory information, most debuggers only know about malloc and calloc.
I don't know enough yet to understand in what way that would enlighten me if I knew enough to be enlightened by it. But I'm glad to know that when I need to know, I'll have a leg up.
And then this here's a little more complicated. We don't necessarily have to get into this. This is a demonstration of what it takes to get a Zig type to play fully nicely with Python types. It's a little extensive. We can look at it if you guys are interested, or not if you're not.
So you're saying this is going the other way?
No, this is an extension of this, right? So let's say we want to get, so I'll show you, right? So in order to access the value of this output, which is in a C types pointer of a C types C float, in order to access its value, we have to do f32.contents.value. Essentially what we're saying is in order to use it, you have to know what it is. But if you did all this garbage and you just said f32 equals, I think I named the class f32 with a caps, yeah, f32 here. You can just, right, it's got a nice display here. If you want to do a times, you can just do f32 times 2 and it works. So what I'm trying to show here is there is more complications. It's not, but if you want to make things super ergonomic, that can be complicated, is what I want to say with this. We can go into exactly how and why if you want to, if you're interested. But in order to get just the basic, all you need to do is literally like a few lines to get basic interop.
Yeah, you're just wrapping it in a class so you can do operator overloading, right?
Yeah, a class to get operator overloading. There's some specific, these are called dunder methods in Python, right? So,
Dunder?
yeah, because they've got
Double underscore.
double underscore before and after.
It's really hard to say double underscore, float double underscore.
Okay.
So, right, the dunder repper method, for instance, this is what it looks like when you print it. So here you overload it to make it so that when it prints, it looks like this, which is what we were seeing before.
Now, could that not be automated from, say you had a Zig struct. I would be surprised if there's not a library for this. Like, take a Zig struct, run a Zig program on the Zig struct, produce the Python program that looks like this.
So there is exactly one tool I'm aware of. I don't remember what it's called. One tool I'm aware of that automatically takes Zig and writes Python wrappers for it. If I remember correctly, it requires a specific version of Python. There's also other boilerplate you need to do. The thing about this boilerplate in particular is the only reason I would ever write this is if I was writing a library wrapper for some big important Zig library that I knew other people would want to use the same wrapper. That stuff isn't all that important. It just makes it easier for other people to use. I don't know that there's that much that requires automation, but that's essentially just an opinion.
And you can always use AI.
No,
Not yet.
not for Zig, you can't.
You're gonna get Zig version 0.11 mixed with 0.10 and
Oh yeah, not for Zig, but for Python to generate all that boilerplate.
yeah, maybe.
You do that.
Maybe. Give it an example of one and then say copy and paste this for the others.
And then the last thing, we can just look at this real quick. This is what it looks like to call Python from Zig. You do a C import, C include, there's a Python library.
Right.
Again, because Python is just a library for C. You initialize Python. You have to do a lot of error checking. Again, the C way, you have to check if things are the number 0 or the number 1 or whatever. You have to initialize a globals dictionary and a locals dictionary. You can skip the locals dictionary, actually. But if you do that, then every variable you create becomes a global.
Who needs local
Do you know? Does the C implementation here, does that include the JIT and the bytecode?
There is no JIT in standard Python.
Okay.
Unless I'm...
JavaScript, everything being global is the ultimate variable hoisting, right?
Just use var.
Yeah.
At least in Python, you know, it's only going to default to globals if you make that decision. In
Sad.
Yeah, but in JavaScript it only defaults to globals if you have absolutely no tooling whatsoever. You know, like your tooling's not going to let you push to GitHub with global variables accidentally declared. You know, so just to be fair.
A couple things to keep in mind. Every time you call a Python function, essentially, you have to manually operate the garbage collector. So that's what this is right now. This is saying there's a reference counter. Just go ahead and deduct one reference from the reference counter of the locals.
Okay.
And then there's a bunch of error testing that you could, in theory, skip if you feel lucky. And
I think I'd rather write it in Zig. This just looks.
so,
very tedious.
why would you do this? Because it is tedious.
Oh, I know.
You're a masochist.
No, it's so that people can write Python in Redis.
Yes, that is why. So people can write Python in Redis. But if you were making a game engine, or say NeoVim, right? What I have so braggadociously used in this demonstration here, it has Lua as a scripting language. It's written in C. But if you want to change the functionality like this right here, where I can bring up a nice-ish looking file explorer, people don't want to write that in C. So they have embedded Lua into NeoVim so that you can program in Lua. This would be the way you would do that with Python.
Real men use Vim script, and I get what you're saying.
Okay, and that's the end of my demonstration. I just wanted to show off a little demo of how you can interface the two if you ever want to.
Will you do a recap again, just now that we've got the whole context of like back to your Hello World example of we write this in Zig, we build it with Zig this way, we import it with Python this way, we run
Yeah,
it this
of course.
way. Yeah. And if you would live code that would be the best. No, I'm not really. Well, I mean, I guess
I did
essentially
some-
that's what it is, because it's a Hello World.
I did some live coding for you earlier. We got enough of that. Right, this is my Hello World program, right? This just exports the number pi.
So export function, do
Pi.
whatever stuff, only one return value.
Only one return value. Zig can only do one return value anyway.
Well, that's not what my mom told me. She said that it could have error enums.
It can, but that's just an enum if it's an error or it's something, you know.
Okay, fair enough.
Then we go back up here.
Can you do like an extern union and make your own error type out of that?
Sure, probably. This is the command, right? It's just really simple. Call the Zig compiler, build lib specifically, give it the thing. You want to make it dynamic.
Okay, dynamics is important.
Dynamic is important. Python cannot directly open static CDLLs, which is essentially what we're compiling this to.
Okay.
And set the optimization to whatever you feel like, but release fast or release small are generally going to be the best. Link the C library just in case, or not. You can take that off and see if yours compiles. And then this is all it takes to call it. Import C types.
Well, it won't if you're using an allocator, because you need to use the C allocator, so you're going to have to link it to C. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then this is Python.
Well, this particular example, I could probably take that off, but
Yeah, because you're not using the allocator.
not using allocator. Then import C types, lib equals ctypes.cdll, dynamically linked library.
And lib might be better called foo in this particular case to avoid confusion. But
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I called everything else foo, so I had to call something.
Oh yeah.
There's also bar and baz.
There is. Well, in Python, normally people use spam and eggs instead of foo and bar, but
Why are you using foo then? That's on you.
I learned to program in C++. Anyway, and then you just call it as if it was a Python function here.
Wow. There's a lot of compatibility going on the screen.
Foo, bar, baz, kooks, koos, korj, gralt, garply, waldo, fred, pluch, zizix, thud.
Who's ever made it that far, honestly? I've done clucks before, I think.
Kooks. Yeah. Kooks.
After I get past Baz, I start doing foo 1, foo 2, foo 3.
You know, I mean, sometimes I do garply just because it, you know, korj and garply kind of sound grumpy. And that suits my mood.
Occasionally I'll use my wife's name and show it to her. But
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
there we go.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have any questions, comments, concerns?
Guess not.
I'm now thinking like, is a Jupyter kernel kind of like a container? And anyway, but no.
It's running the Python REPL in the background. And so when you run this cell, it's sending these lines to the REPL.
Yeah. We can always get like, shell access and everything. I just feel like you opened my eyes as to the full potential of Jupyter, so.
I like it. I am technically a data scientist in that I went to a boot camp for data science.
Oh, excellent.
And data scientists like using Jupyter Notebook And even though I don't do almost any data science, actually, I have held on to the habit when I'm programming in Python. It's a lot better than using the regular REPL. But,
I agree.
yeah.
I use it a decent amount actually, so, but not as cleverly as you do.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Well,
All right, well, thank you very much.
of course.
Okay, and who has the next lightning talk prepared? Niles, don't cheap out on us.
I always think stuff.
That's why I said don't cheap out on us.
I thought you were supposed to give the next presentation.
It looks like the next presentation will fall to me. I have thought about it, and I am strategizing as to how I will do that and provide value to our humble community. But today is not that day. No, I need to basically go back in from scratch and complete my .env program.
Yeah, you've been working on that.
But I haven't. I only worked on it
You've been thinking
three
about
times.
it, but not on it.
I've worked on it 3 or 4 times, and 2 times was like 4-hour stretches.
Just rewrite your entire not a package manager in Zig.
Let's see. Would that be? No, well, okay, so this is a first principles problem. Because the whole idea is that you should be able to curl to get it, which means that you have to use what is available on the system, which means that it is limited to the POSIX shell and PowerShell. Oh, and Windows 11 creates some problems with PowerShell because, well, actually, I guess it's not necessarily Windows 11, but there's 2 primary versions of PowerShell, but they have different security policies. So you can call one from the other, but you can't call the other from the one.
You know, Linus Torvalds once said, "I don't believe Microsoft is evil. I just believe they're not very good at making operating systems."
Yeah, well, so yeah, PowerShell has this security policy. One of the ways that you can get around the security policy is by piping from the internet into PowerShell.
Very secure.
Well, it's not any more or less secure than anything else. You know, you're going to download something, you're going to run it. You're going to copy and paste something, you're going to run it. So no, it's really not like that whole thing is a myth. It's based off of how floppy disks worked and checksums and like malicious routers in Mexico, like Wi-Fi hotspots in Mexico and stuff like that. It's not. People like to parrot it because it makes them feel like I know something you don't know. Obviously, I'm in the know and you're not in the know. But in reality, the people who are parroting that information aren't from the era in which it was generated, and they don't know why they're parroting it. But that all aside,
I mean, the official way to install Rust is to pipe stuff from the internet into your...
Yes, this is normal. This is normal. We want it to be quick and easy. And Rust, actually, I learned some things from the Rust installer because it is able to regain access to the TTY. So normally when you pipe a shell, when you pipe a script into a shell, you lose the TTY. So if you try to open standard input to ask the user a question, then you can't because the TTY doesn't exist. So yeah, I learned some tricks about how TTYs work. Right? Like they wrote a POSIX compliant. Theirs is not Bash because it needs to work on BSD and Alpine Linux, and it's got to work in all the places. So they use the POSIX shell.
Yeah, BSD still defaults to SH.
Depending on the BSD.
FreeBSD does.
Yeah. So, but I mean, like, why shouldn't it? Because if you're not going to use it as an interactive shell, then why? I think that Bash is the weirdest choice to make because if you want an interactive shell, you could use one of the other shells that are meant for being interactive, and if you don't need an interactive shell, then you could use one of the other shells that's a lot simpler. So Bash is kind of like the worst middle ground in terms of it's not a good interactive shell, and it's not a good performance shell. I mean, for as much as shells are performant, but anyway, my point was just that it has a weird security policy, and if you call it from another script and tell it to turn off the security policy, then it'll run without turning on the security policy. If you pipe it from a string rather than reading it from a file, because the policy applies to files. So if you want to run a PowerShell script, if you want someone to be able to run a PowerShell script on their system, you actually need to make a CMD, a command, a batch program that then calls PowerShell to run the PowerShell script, because if you just have them run the PowerShell script, they'll get permission denied and they have to go check some boxes deep in some system menu somewhere. So, but then, yeah, with PowerShell Core, which is not installed by default on Windows, I don't understand what it is, and no one's been able to explain it to me. I tried to hire a Windows expert to help me figure this out, and I couldn't. So, but it's a weird thing. But as I couldn't do it in Zig, the reason I couldn't do it in Zig is because I have to do all of the hard work, like detecting what's the operating system, what's the CPU architecture, which binary am I going to fetch, like all of that work would have to be done. If I were to write it in Zig, all of that work would still have to be done, because I'd have to know which CPU architecture I'm on, what operating system, in order to go fetch it, and then I have to know like what's available. Am I using curl? Am I using wget? Is it busybox wget, or is it GNU wget? Like all of this stuff has to be known in order to fetch the thing. Therefore, it must be written in shell, and if it were to, the part that could be written in Zig would be A, a lot of duplication, and B, the unique value would be so small that it wouldn't be worth doing. So, on the one hand, I would have loved to have written it in Zig. I started writing it in Go at one point before the idea was fully formed, but it just ended up that it had to be shell. And POSIX shell is pretty amazing. You can write programs in POSIX shell. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can write a JSON parser in POSIX shell. It can be done.
You can also write a JSON parser in BrainFudge. Wouldn't recommend that.
But there's the
They won't be
web
blazing
framework
fast
bash
enough.
on balls.
What's that?
There's a web framework bash on balls.
Someone wrote
It's a
a
variant of Ruby on Rails, but with bash.
Oh, was
Yeah.
that the bad cop or bash cop? Is that what her name is?
I don't remember who wrote it. I just like the name.
I think someone wrote a
I like Ruby on Rails.
Somebody did a. I think it was.
Minecraft server in Bash.
Somebody did
Oh.
Cobalt on wheelchair.
I thought it was Cobalt on Cogs.
There might be that one too, but there's a Cobalt on wheelchair or
One
something like
project
that.
I really liked, there was a compiler that compiles to assembly where the only instruction used is move. Which is pretty amazing.
There's a programming language where a blank file always equals hello world.
Nice.
That's nice. I like that. I am also going to go ahead and stop the stream. So, for all of the Brazilians of people who tuned in, oh yeah, we do have a few people tuned in. If you have any last questions or thoughts or comments, go ahead and voice them now. You have 45 seconds, more or less. And then I'm just going to end the stream. I'm not going to count that out. I'm just going to see if anybody says hello or anything. All right. Niles is going to get more pizza. That's his solution to the 45-second problem. Okay. I don't know that it was not a promise to give 45 seconds. I'm just going to go ahead and end it. I don't see any activity.